This is our fourth episode this year that has come as a kind of extra on top of our regular season. And I just wanted to make a note before we start today that the reason we've been able to do this is because of our patrons. I write about 24 hours worth of episodes a year, maybe 25, and that's about what I have time for given my responsibilities, teaching and raising children and cooking dinner. So patrons help to allow me to buy the services and various things I need to have more time to create more content like these bonus interview episodes that we've been releasing this year. So if you value having more content on your Occult Confessions feed, please consider giving at our Patreon. Just visit occultconfessions.com and click on Donate. Thanks. We, the members of the Secret Order of Alchemical Actors, do solemnly commit ourselves to a full and honest telling of the history of the occult as far as we know it. Hello, Rob C. Thompson here, your Supreme Hierophant, welcoming you to another episode of our Alchemical Anthropology series. In fact, though, we might as well sub out the A's there. This is more like Alchemical Archaeology today. I am joined by Miranda Yancey, who is an archaeologist. She has her master's degree in Geographic Information Systems from Southern Illinois University at Edwardsville. And she works as the Illinois Inventory of Archaeological Sites technician and also at the Illinois State Museum. So we were just talking before, and Miranda describes this as she's the person behind the closed doors where it says you can't enter.
Yes. In the closet on the computer.
Welcome, Miranda.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me. This is really great.
I am delighted. So Miranda had written to me saying, Rob, would you be interested in doing an episode on burial mounds? And Miranda knew so much about burial mounds that I said, well, why don't you do one with me? So here we are.
Yes.
Okay, so.
I just wanted to say first off, this is a topic that hold dear to me, and I don't want to sound like a Debbie Downer at the end.
Oh, okay.
I love conspiracy theories. Just in advance, I don't see me as a Debbie Downer, please.
It's a nice teaser. So yes, we will be. This is what the occult confession folks like. They like us to get into the weird and then debunk it, right?
Yeah. So I love you guys. Yeah.
Thank you. So let's get started on these. So the topic today is burial mounds, ancient burial mounds. So tell me first, how ancient are we talking?
Well, there's multiple cultures across North America that built mounds. The oldest ones go back to about 3,500. Some people say as far as 4,500 BCE. Yeah, and in the South, they have a lot of very large complexes. So one of the really old archaic mound complexes is at a place called Poverty Point in Louisiana, and there's over a square mile of earthworks and mounds at that location, and it was built around 1500 BCE. So,
wow.
Those are some of the oldest ones. And around Illinois, we find a lot of older archaic burial mounds, small conical mounds on bluff tops here. So we don't get the large complexes like they have in the South, but there's still archaic mound building going on all over.
So yeah, in religious studies, we think 1500 BC is pretty freaking old because that's like your Upanishads. I'm sorry, not Upanishads. That's your earliest Vedic texts. That's 1,000 years before we're writing the Old Testament, even yes. According to many estimates. So this is a long time ago.
It was, and I would recommend looking up Poverty Point and just looking at the arrangement. It's really something else, especially when you think about how old it is.
I want to get into what the sites look like in a second, but before I do, can you tell me so they're at Louisiana, they're in Illinois, where are these burial mounds?
There are mounds all the way across the Midwest, into New York, Northeast, Southeast.
Wow.
People think of the Mississippi River Valley as having, I guess, the most, but They were known for Mississippian culture, and Mississippians also, that was the last big mound building culture in North America pre-contact. So, which there was actually still Mississippians in the South when the Spanish came who observed them building mounds.
Is this an American thing? Do we find them in other parts of the world?
Lots of different cultures build mounds. It's just what materials do you have on hand, and if you go to the Southeast, they had stonework, but here in the Midwest, they were building these pyramids out of soil, and they were really engineered. It wasn't just piling up of whatever dirt you could find. These were engineered with layers of clay and sand, and they were improved over the years. So if a site started slumping, the tribes would go in and repair them. So it was really, sometimes it's hard to date them because they might have been used, for a very long time, maybe abandoned, and then maybe another group came in.
Oh, so you'll find newer artifacts. I see.
You can sometimes trace when the mound was built, but it's also possible that they were being reused over time.
So tell me a little bit about what they looked like. Let's start with, what we would have seen in 1500 BCE and what we might see now. How would we know we're approaching a burial mound?
Well, it just depends. So there's different types of mounds. Burial mounds generally tend to be your smaller conical mounds, but there's also large platform mounds. And so if you were to come to Cahokia, that actually is much later. Cahokia boomed at about 1050.
And where's that at?
That is across the river from St. Louis. It's a World Heritage Site, one of the few UNESCO World Heritage Sites in the Midwest. It was the largest prehistoric city north of Mexico. And its largest mound, which is called Monk's Mound, because Trappist monks set up shop there in the 1700s for a while. So that's how it got its name. But it's about the size of the base of it's about the size of the Great Pyramid, and it's about 100 feet tall, and it's multi-platform mound that's aligned at the end of a causeway and large plaza. We actually know on the solstices, then it aligns perfectly with the Milky Way, which was a lot of native people venerate the Milky Way and the timing of it. And so that's some of our more recent research that's come about in Illinois there.
It's interesting.
Yeah, it's a really fascinating site, and it's just huge mounds. There's a lot of them preserved in Cahokia Mounds. It's a state historic site. And there's actually, if people want to contact their senators and Congress people, they're trying to make it into a national park.
Oh.
So it's something that they pushed a few years ago and didn't really get anywhere. But it really should be. Like I said, it's a World Heritage Site.
And that's in Missouri? Or?
It's in Illinois.
It's in Illinois.
Yep.
Okay.
It's just across the river from.
Okay, I see.
From St.
So
Louis.
if you're from Illinois, right? You're state senator, right? Or national park or state park?
National park. It's
okay.
Yeah,
well, write your senator.
Exactly. Yeah, it's in Congress. They just brought it up. They're going to be voting on it soon. So.
Oh, cool.
So if anybody wants to.
That's neat. Yeah, please do. Please write in. So when we approach them now, they would look like 100-foot tall hills.
Well, sort of a platform, so almost a pyramid, almost like a.
So the tiny top.
A soil pyramid. Yeah. Yep. It'll exactly kind of step in. And if you would have been there during Mississippian times, then there would have been a very large ceremonial temple built on the top, that very top of the mound.
Wow.
But you can still walk up the mountain today. They have stairs on it, so you can walk up to the top and go out there during the solstice. And they also had some wood hinges that were used to track the astronomical alignments. So it was it's really fascinating. So if you were to walk and went into one of these complexes, you would see multiple smaller mounds, maybe burial mounds at a certain part of the site, and then where the ceremonial center was, usually the platform. That's where you're going to find your platform mounds.
So the slope of the mound was such that you could walk to the top, or you can right now.
Yeah, yep.
But you always could walk to the top. So
Yes.
do you have any idea what happened in these temples? I know that's really hard to know what humans do in these spaces since we just have the artifacts, but any
Yeah.
guesses?
I don't think I'd really want to speculate too much. We
Yeah.
know that there was like a red cedar was a very sacred tree for them, and there was a massive red cedar found in the top of the mound that had been driven in a massive post. So those ceremonial posts were important, and we know that, but it's so hard to say without any written record.
So the artifacts you see are these posts. You see the hinges for
Yeah,
astrological calculations, that sort of thing. Any other artifacts associated with the temples?
there's been burial temples with really amazing grave goods, effigy pots, shell beads, copper artifacts, just really ornate, beautiful burial items. But you're not going to find that in every mound. Sometimes there are not people buried in mounds. Not every mound is a burial mound.
Okay.
So it's and we don't dig into them now like they used to.
Right. Okay.
Nowadays, and we know that possibility for human remains, is there, and so the goal is to try to preserve and conserve it and not necessarily dig it. And that's something we work with the tribal groups, like if a mound is found in a project, we'll work with the tribes because they want to see it be avoided. I've been on a project where IDOT ended up green spacing because we had found a previously unknown mound. And so they ended up changing their highway plans a bit to green space that area and make sure it wasn't impacted. So,
well, that's great.
Yeah. And so really now that's one thing. It's so hard to kind of go against these myths of the mound builders because we just don't, people want to see this great excavation these days, but we just don't do that. Like maybe we could help dispel some myths if we did, but we don't, and I don't think we should.
So the fact that there's temples on top of burial mounds suggests that, at least we could guess there was some funerary rite perhaps being performed. I guess though, right?
Yes, and there have been found charnel houses nearby, okay. And you'll find cremated remains.
Fascinating.
There's really a lot of variation.
Yeah, I guess I have to make a correction here because I talk about Blavatsky bringing cremation to the United States, but in fact, it was here long before.
Yeah. Or sometimes they would, also just leave them up and kind of let you decay naturally, and then bundle the bones together, and you'll find bundled burials. They kind of let nature take you.
I mean, the people are sort of doing that now, right? There's a return to this natural burial.
Is. Yeah. I think much better than getting pumped full of chemicals thrown in the ground.
Yeah, I don't know what you're preserving there. You're not going to last one way or the other in a physical sense. All right, so let's so we've been teasing this people who have interacted with the mounds through history. Let's get into this a bit. How have people? So we're talking about the native people, indigenous people, ancient tribes, really, ancient groups who built these mounds. But what happened when white people showed up?
Ooh, well, most people immediately went to the lost race theory, and there's this huge debate about the origins of Native Americans, and even going back to the 1500s, there was people saying they had to have come from Atlantis and they built these mounds, and now they're gone because there's no way that the current natives could possibly construct these monuments. Interestingly, Thomas Jefferson excavated a mound on his property, and he concluded early on, no, this is totally Native American. He even remembered seeing natives making trips to that mound whenever he was a child. There were still natives in the area that would come there to do a ritual or venerate the mound. So he had no question that it was built by natives, but it quickly went from everything from Vikings to the ancient Welsh. The lost tribe of Israel was another big one with the Book of Mormon, and that really helped kick that one off. But it was around even before Book of Mormon. But and even the Hindu culture, some people speculated that Hindus came over, built the mounds, um, and then disappeared. It's that's a problem. This race is always disappearing. um,
Mm-hmm.
but it kind of eventually settled on the idea of Vikings. I think that was the most predominant belief. It was basically that Europeans originally discovered this land, and then they were destroyed by these savages, the natives that we find today. And that was the belief for a very long time.
Well, let's dig into these theories a little bit one by one. Let's start with well, which one should we do? Let's start with Atlantis. That one's a fun one.
Yes.
So, I'm a little surprised by the interpretation of Atlantis because my understanding from theosophical standpoint, the theosophists after Blavatsky, and I think in part from Blavatsky, they theorized that it was possible that America's native people were descended from the people of Atlantis. But you're saying that these folks came, the white colonizers discovering these mounds would say, yeah, the people from Atlantis built this, but they're not related to our contemporary native people.
Correct. That and you start seeing that with a lot of these beliefs, like with the great white giants that were actually the mound builders, and then they were destroyed by later inhabitants that are the natives we have today. Like I think it was a way of justifying that the Europeans had this land first.
Okay, so let's do the Vikings and Gigantopithecus.
Yes.
I wrote this down, Gigantopithecus. This is I guess the species we attributed to or have invented to say that these people are. So the idea is that Vikings, some of the most dangerous, I think, people in the history of human culture, right? They ravaged Europe.
Yes.
That they came to America, became very weak, and then just got their butts handed to them. That's
exactly.
the idea?
Yeah.
Okay.
But only after building these great mounds all over.
And this is maybe John Fitch comes into play here. This is, I think, a 19th century or late 18th century person who said that they were military fortifications. Is this involved at all here? Did he think they were Vikings, or maybe you can't speak to Fitch exactly, but
well, I know that in general, for a long time, people said how the mounds had to have held the bodies of warriors. Like, so when this race was being destroyed, they were also still building, I guess, mounds to hold the bodies of the lost warriors.
So the theories don't necessarily link together. I mean, if they were skilled warriors, then probably they weren't defeated by the Native Americans. Maybe they died on their own or something. Or is it that they were skilled, awesome warriors, but our American Indians were better warriors than them?
Yeah. Just I think there was no way anyone was going to admit that Native people were
building these.
Exactly. So, okay. I mean, because they're found all over, and that's the thing, is like the Vikings would have had to have traveled all over, not just their little settlement,
Right. So the Vikings, historically, they arrived, like 1,000 years into our side of the year one, right?
Yeah.
And they got to port towns, or they maybe founded a little port area, or did they even stay?
I don't think they stayed long. There's not much evidence. And I think it wasn't until there's only been like one or two sites that have any kind of, we know they were at least there for a short time. I don't think there's any evidence to suggest that they tried to establish any real colony.
Let alone traveled all the way to Mississippi.
Yes, and down to Louisiana and right. Out to Kansas and Oklahoma.
Because we're talking about like northern Canada, right? Isn't that where they landed?
Yeah, northeastern Canada, yeah. And they would have had to have gone all the way to Florida. And they had to have been there too because the Spanish actually watched mounds being built. So they would have completely changed by that time. So that's a short amount of time to have done all that stuff.
So there's Spanish accounts of, I guess, Mexican people building Aztecs?
And in Florida. So
in Florida. Okay, Florida, so our North American people.
Yeah, so the Mississippian culture was still in existence. It had faded up north, like where Cahokia is. And by that time, it was still in the far south. So they actually had contact with Mississippian cultures, and they watched them work on mounds and worship at mounds. And but yeah, these other guys never seemed to read the Spanish explorers. Right? They went into all these other tangents, but never thought to look
Just
into
read the
that.
accounts. Yeah,
Yeah,
read the journals.
yeah.
All right, let's talk about Gigantopithecus. We teased that one a moment ago. So this, from what I could tell, the reading you sent me was based on the finding that some of the body parts, the teeth in particular, of some of the bodies that were excavated from these mounds were large or unusually large. So could you tell me a little bit of the theory that there were actual giants on North America?
Yes, so that starts with the Bible, and there's been a couple mound builder enthusiast reverends that really pushed the giants from the book of Genesis as the ancient mound builders. And it was actually even like mentioned in school books around this time. But basically, a lot of these skeletons that they've looked at now from these sites, they're just mismeasured. There's also a lot of Ice Age bones, like the mastodon tooth, and there's been femurs from giant sloths found, and people just misidentified it as being parts of giant humans.
I did see something about a 47-inch femur.
Yeah, yeah, and it's just people weren't that aware of anatomy and the human skeleton. So it was a lot of misidentification going on. And there was also straight out hoaxes of giant stone giants that were petrified, supposedly. Like there's an example of like Cardiff giant.
Oh yeah, the giant. Yeah, that was what's his face? Barnum got involved in that, right?
Yes, he did. Yep.
What happened there, just briefly?
Oh well, this farmer said he dug up a large fossilized man. He sold, I think, some of his interests in it, but he immediately started displaying the remains as, an ancient giant of America.
Right. People came to visit.
Exactly. Thousands of people came to visit. And yeah, Barnum tried to buy it from him. They wouldn't sell. So I guess he ended up making his own copy of their fraud to display. But eventually this guy's, I think it was his cousin. It was one of his family members who helped him with the fraud and actually confessed.
So that puts me in mind of the Lost Tribes of Israel theory, because the Newark, Ohio, there was the Newark Holy Stones. They were discovered by a guy named David Wyrick. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yes. So basically he found there's the flow stone that he believed was used in Jewish rituals.
It was three things. It was a keystone, a bowl, and a decalogue. Yeah.
Yeah. Basically, I do know that Cyrus Thomas, who cleared up the issue of mound builders, he did personally inspect all of those and determine them to be false. But they had Hebrew inscriptions on them, but apparently they didn't make a lot of sense. And
it was supposed to have been the Ten Commandments, right? But they weren't written well or something.
Yeah.
There's a lot of errors, and the Hebrew was very recent Hebrew.
Yeah, it was clearly to Thomas, at least, Cyrus Thomas, who was eventually the one who studied thousands and thousands of mounds, and he was paid by the government to look into the mound builder myth, and he concluded that no, it's Native Americans. But yes, the Lost Tribe of Israel was a big one, and that one would kind of come and go in popularity. And besides the Newark stones, there's been other Hebrew-like artifacts that people claim to have found.
So yeah, according to Genesis, there's like something like 8 to 10 tribes of Israel of the 12 that just sort of got lost. They got wandered off, and we don't know what happened to them. And you mentioned the Book of Mormon. Joseph Smith argued in part that one of the lost tribes had come and established the Holy Land, specifically, I guess, at Salt Lake City. But he also believed Nauvoo, Illinois might be the Holy Land, right?
Yeah, and Jackson County, Missouri, I think, was the Garden of Eden, too.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, well, Smith died right in your state there, right?
Yes,
in Illinois.
he did.
met his end trying to leave jail. The
Yeah.
Mormons argue about whether or not he was escaping jail. I can't remember, but he was persecuted anyhow.
Yeah,
So
I haven't been up there. I need to make it up to Nauvoo sometime.
yeah, I'm sure it'd be interesting to see. I don't know if they
Mhm.
have that preserved or what, but
I know it's yeah. There's a historic site up there, so
these folks were with the Lost Tribes theory. They were, I mean, maybe there were some Mormons among them, but they weren't necessarily trying to prove Joseph Smith right. They were just working through biblical history.
exactly. And that started even way before, like even going back to the 17th century. There's people arguing it was the lost tribe of Israel that came to the New World. So it really started way back, and it's one of those themes that keep popping up every so often in this debate.
Yeah, let's get into this a little bit. So first, maybe who were these people? Who did build these mounds? If it wasn't giants burying, I guess, their fellow giants, if it wasn't Vikings, if it wasn't Atlanteans, who was it?
Yes, it was the ancestors of our current Native Americans, which many of them told Cyrus that and told other folks that. And it was widely ignored for a very long time. But really, there are so many mound building cultures in the U.S., so it's so hard to generalize. But the only way I can is by saying the descendants of our current Native Americans. And there's Native groups that track their lineage to specific cultures, like the Mississippian culture, the Osage. In their histories, they believe they are the descendants of Mississippian culture, and it's really important for them to keep that identity. And I just don't want to see that identity lost, because it has been for so long, and it shouldn't be perpetuated, because they're humans and they've been here, and they will tell you that.
Yes, just for our folks who don't remember from middle school, when did our native people, or how did our native people come to the Americas? How long have they been here?
Well, there's some pre-Clovis sites that go back about 15,000.
15,000 years?
Yeah. We never work on anything that old here. So my dates of my earlier, we do woodland and Mississippi and pretty much some archaic.
So how did folks get here?
Basically the land bridge, but there was also some traveling, maybe boats along the land bridge too, or basically they came from Asia. And people were saying that early on too. It's amazing that some of these guys were right early on in the debate.
So the land bridge, meaning like Siberia area, they walked from Siberia over to Canada, essentially.
Yes.
So, and that happened maybe 15,000 years before zero, or 15,000 years ago?
Well, the pre-Clovis are around 15,000, so I think this would be more like 13. Yeah,
hell of a long time ago.
Yeah.
Hell of a long time
pre-Clovis,
ago.
yeah. Very long.
Now, I mean, of course, it's tempting. We probably couldn't speculate this far, but it's tempting to say that since the burial mounds are so widespread across the continent, that maybe this was a practice of, those original people who were making that crossing. Is there any speculation on that? You know what I mean? Like if this is a shared practice?
Yeah, and I mean, that's something people have said, but and you find mounds across the world too. So I think
it's so hard to theorize, right?
It is, because at the same time, it's like, why would you need to build something out of stone? Why couldn't you just build a mound? So
you mean why the practice changed?
Yeah, and people, like they did mounds versus pyramids. A lot of people see mounds and pyramids as being very similar, and I think they are. It's just a matter of where you're at, what materials you have, whether or not you're going to build a mound or a stone pyramid.
I see. So when we get into Mexico and further points south, where we start to see a lot of these stone structures, you think that's because they didn't have the kind of clay that we have in North America?
Yeah, and they probably had better stone and more stone than what we had in the Midwest.
Easier to work with,
more
abundant.
Abundant, yeah.
And of course, sand for the Egyptians.
Isn't good. Yes, exactly. You're not going to build your mounds out of sand.
So what are some differences? I mean, how would you characterize the differences in the way these are done What are some varieties of mounds we might come across?
Well, usually the conical mounds. I think that's what most people think of when you just think of a mound, just a regular conical shape. There was also the platform like mounds, and they could have a lot of different platform styles, but it's reminiscent of the stepped pyramids.
Hmm.
And then there's also a lot of just earthworks in general, effigy mounds, and
So how do you know it's an effigy mound?
where it so like the serpent effigy mound is
Yeah.
looks like a serpent with an egg in his mouth. There's bird effigy mounds, so they
Oh,
built the mound to look like a bird.
and you can see that from the sky. Oh, that's
Yes,
very
yeah.
interesting. And we have no idea why, right? But it's super interesting.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you have any guesses? Are we allowed to guess?
I mean, I it could be a show for the gods, or
Oh,
you know,
yeah,
it doesn't
right,
necessarily
yeah.
have to be.
That it can be seen from space, yeah.
Yeah, and yeah. I don't want to jump into that. The ancient astronauts and
Oh, right, yeah.
starting to get me in dangerous territory.
Yeah, I mean, when we get, yes, yeah, right. Well,
As
we
an
did do an episode on
archaeologist,
that.
I know. Yeah, and I
We did
enjoy
the
it because
Sumerians.
as an archaeologist, and now I realized how common these beliefs are. I meet people and they say, "Oh, there's a giant in Kokia at Monk's Mound," and I'm like, "No."
Yeah, we tend to pick
Yeah.
on the History Channel a little bit. I think
Yeah,
they're part of your problem there.
they
They
are.
tend
I
to
agree.
propagate this.
Yes, I every time you say something about them, I wholeheartedly agree.
Particularly for archaeologists. I mean, because they mess around with ancient culture so much, because I think there's so much that we can only guess at as far as the reasons behind things.
Exactly, exactly. And
Harder to do that with the Declaration of Independence, and yet we still have movies like the Da Vinci Code. And, oh no,
National
National Treasure.
Treasure, yeah.
Sorry, National Treasure. Although Da Vinci was not that old in comparison to what you're talking about either.
Yeah.
So, in comparison, let's get into. I have a note here about William Bartram. So, getting sort of at why exactly we would. I guess the mystery here, in part, is why colonizers would come, see these mounds, see that native people are engaging with them, and then come up with these stories. I mean, very far-fetched stories about Vikings and Atlantis, and like you
Yes.
have to work, right? You have to go all
Yeah.
the way back to Plato to tell the Atlantis story before Blavatsky. So why? Why? So William Bartram, my note here is that he reported that Creek and Cherokee regarded the mounds as having been built before they arrived. And to Bartram, the important point of that was that this meant that the native people had colonized, much like whites had colonized North America. So obviously Bartram is a little bit off. I mean, the Creek and Cherokee may have maybe been talking about their own ancestors, But what do you make of this?
Oh, I make of it as just it's helping us justify America's manifest destiny to take over. It's we can't see these current native peoples as truly being indigenous because guess what? Europeans found this first and then were destroyed. So I think it was, and it's something you see get printed as the Indian removal acts increase with time and it starts becoming popularized in school books as some of our actions towards Native Americans became, even more violent and pushing them further and further out. So it definitely had a political purpose.
So through the 19th century, we see a propagation of these theories.
Exactly. And it's definitely, I think it's just to drive American culture forward with our belief that this land is our land to do what we want. It also takes away from having to preserve these mounds, which is it's interesting because some early mounds were preserved only because people thought that Vikings or Welsh built them. And then once it was finally determined later on, like, okay, natives built them, then it was okay to just destroy them. But some early mounds actually saw preservation early because there was a wide belief of white European groups had been the ones to actually build them.
John Dee was actually involved in that whole. John Dee tried to prove that the Welsh had discovered America. Oddly enough, so yet again the occult pops up. Yeah, yeah. I was trying to think as you were talking about the Welsh, because it seems sort of weird that it's the Vikings or the Welsh of all people. But yeah, it was John Dee that just came back to me as you were talking, that had tried to prove to Elizabeth, because he was trying to justify England's right to North America.
Okay, by
over the others. Yeah, if the Welsh had found it first, then the Spanish had no right to it, or the Italians, or the French. We had a right. By we, I mean the British had a right to it. My people are Welsh and British, so.
Yeah, Yancey, there's no surname, but the family story is two brothers that came from Wales.
Oh, okay.
To North Carolina in the 1600s. And...
So we're arguing against our own best interests here, Miranda. We should be all over the Wales theory.
Yes.
So, interesting. So, I mean, basically the argument then is that Europeans were here first and the native people supplanted them, and therefore we should take it back. Does this work just as well if giants were here or Israelites?
It seems to for them.
Yeah.
I feel like part of it, that was also part of a religious, America with our religion and how we like to tie everything.
Right. So if we say
together.
It's the Israelites are pre-Christians. They became the Christians in theory, right? Through Jesus. Therefore, they're us.
Exactly. And it's also just, I think, anything to reinforce biblical truths of what they saw as being true. Like I said, there's a few prominent reverends who were very much into the lost ancient race theories, and a lot of them went on with the lost tribe of Israel. And I think it was just, and they also really pitched the giants, and it was just to validate what they're reading in the Bible. They're looking for that validation, and they'll find it when they look that hard.
I mean, it's interesting because, when we think about the role of the Christian church, or Christianity, the Christian church, the Catholic Church, I guess, historically, but then Christianity more broadly and their missionary work, I mean, they're really trying to colonize native people no matter where they go. And here they are taking dead native people and turning them into aspects of Christianity or Judeo-Christianity. Yeah, it's fascinating.
It is. And, that was a lot of, I guess you could say, more of the educated views on mounds at the time. Most people, like just normal people, saw mounds in a really supernatural way. Like a lot of like local newspapers or, small town papers would talk about treasure hunting on mounds, and they're guarded by ghosts and demons.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and people in, as Emma Harding Britton. Actually,
Emma Harding Britton.
Yeah. She was going to try to contact the mound builders at a seance. They were going to take her out to Newark, Ohio later on to meet the spirit. But a fire spirit took over, and there was a fire, and she never made it to the mounds.
Oh my goodness. I am one of like 3 people on planet Earth, I think, who is an expert on Emma Harding Britton. I did not know that story. That is a new one by me.
Yeah, I'll send in her biography there. She talks about the mound builders and this doctor she's working with, and he's convinced they're Freemasons.
Wow.
The mound
I've read that book, but I must have breezed right over it because, and it doesn't have to do with your whatever argument you're making.
Exactly. Yeah.
I was like, oh, that's a weird thing.
I was looking for mounds and
yeah,
mounds
there
and
it
occultism.
is.
So
oh, well, you don't need to send it to me. I'm going to search them, Miranda.
Yes,
yeah, that's very
in
interesting.
There,
yeah, how about that?
And
that's fascinating. So, I mean, for folks who haven't listened to our first few episodes of this whole podcast, Britton was the historian of spiritualism, and she's one of the 3 people, along with P.B. Randolph and Helena Blavatsky, who invented American occultism, essentially, and then exported it to the wide world. And here she is. Well, spiritualists were fascinated with native people, though. Mm-hmm. So for her, I imagine contacting the mound builders, I'm guessing she would probably have seen them as native people. Or does it say otherwise?
I with her, I would think so. It sounds like the doctor she was with was pretty convinced they were Freemasons.
That the mound builders were Freemasons.
Yes.
Wow. Yeah, her husband, near the end of her life, she married very late in life. How about that? He believed they were
Or
Freemasons. Well,
it's this
ancient
Dr.
Freemasons.
Fowler. Yeah, ancient Freemasons who had.
Oh, it wasn't her husband then. Just another doctor she was hanging with.
Yeah, yeah, with the seance, and I guess the spirit.
She was going to investigate.
Yeah, yep,
See if we really were Freemasons.
yeah.
That's wild. So yet another theory that they were built by ancient Freemasons, which I guess ties back to the Temple of Solomon and the Israelites, right?
Yes, yeah.
Oh, that's fascinating. Boy, these mounds, there's no end of fun cultural tidbits
It
surrounding them.
is. They were, yeah, people picked them up. There was people who would do seances at Mounds, trying to connect with the dead.
We were talking a little bit before we started today about the trope of the vanishing Indian, which is a 19th century idea. How do these ideas feed into this trope?
I to me, they're almost justifying
That they should be, that they are vanished, that they
that they
have
are
vanished.
that they have and they are vanished, and that's what this whole lost race theory was all about. And I think it was also tied into the fact that they saw them, European Anglo Americans saw themselves as being above the natives.
So both above and before, prior to, they're sort of like the interlopers on this land.
And they're also disappearing. The real ones are.
Yeah, so I mean, in the 19th century, we romanticized the Native American. Originally, I mean, there was these two tropes in the theater world anyway on stage, and theater used to be all of entertainment for the most part.
Yeah.
And the old trope was the savage varmint Indian, where was deceitful and would stab you, and it's sort of like the Wild West kind of conception. And eventually, that image gave way to something more like a vanishing or noble,
The noble savage.
Indian. Yeah, who's we're losing, and we mourn this loss, but it's sort of like the inevitable tide of history is to wipe these people away.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that was a political use of the mound builder myth, to help justify colonialization and removal of Native Americans.
Right, all that action by the military.
Yes.
And the settlers, the pioneers, and these sort of folks crossing the West. Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting how it comes to play in all that. And as we were saying before, this is something we want to be sensitive to today.
Exactly.
We don't talk about Native people in the past tense. We talk about Native people in the present tense because they are here. They are with us. We can meet them. They're around. Do you do work with Native people? I mean, you mentioned that you had interactions with folks as you were doing some excavation. So could you tell me a little bit about how Native people today engage with the burial mounds?
Well, basically they work with a lot of museums, and they work with archaeologists today, basically to preserve mounds and to repatriate grave goods and skeletal remains that are in museum collections. So they have the Native American Grave Repatriation Act, NAGPRA, and that by law allows Native cultures to make claims to archaeological materials. So we work with tribes a lot with that. Right now, the museum I work at, we're getting ready to revamp. The Peoples of the Past exhibit is extremely old, I think from maybe the 80s, very out of date. And it's something we're working with tribes to make sure that they're not presented as vanished, that they're still here, and to get their input as to how they would like to be presented, and what kind of things they would like to see. So it's really, we're trying to do our best to work with Native people. And I think it's important to get their voice out there. And I initially contacted you because I thought you did such a great job with the Elders of Zion conspiracy theory, which is very
thank you.
racist. And to me, this is a very racist theory too. And now it's gone into this whole ancient aliens, and there's all these Giants of America TV show, and it all comes from this colonizer view of natives, and it's very harmful. And it might be fun to think about giants, but it's really a damaging belief. And I think all of these things that take away from cultures of the past are damaging. And I think especially to Native peoples. So that's why I contacted you to see
Yeah,
if you were interested.
I think maybe I've been suffering under a little bit of a misconception as we talk, because I understood these ideas as being of the past. I got to give myself away to my listeners here. I don't actually, although I talk about the History Channel and mock them a little bit, it's often because I come across their websites. I don't actually turn it on. I mean, I guess we have cable, but we use Apple TV, so we don't.
Yeah, I don't.
You know what I mean? I'm never
it.
flipping through the channel. So these ideas are still with us.
Yes, very much so, and it really surprises me because the people after they meet me, oh, what do you do? Oh, I'm an archaeologist. Oh, what do you think about the ancient aliens? Or oh, do you know there's giants? There's giants buried in Cahokia Mounds. I'm like, no, there's not.
I mean, the ancient aliens. Yeah, I hear that. I mean, that definitely is everywhere, and we've done that episode. But yeah, so people still think that
the giants. Yes,
the giants.
It's coming back. This guy wrote a book a few years ago about the conspiracy and how the Smithsonian covered this all up. So now people are all riled up over the Smithsonian and NAGPRA saying they're hiding the remains of these giants. And they're all taken from these like 19th century newspaper accounts, which I'm sure you've read enough 19th century newspapers to know that if there are people are worried about fake news today, they should have seen it back then.
Yeah. I mean, that's the beauty of work in the archive, right? Is that you have to try to figure out what the bias is and what the angle is on those old newspaper stories. Yep. People will do the same to us one day, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So the angle is no longer what it was in the 19th century about Europeans or Vikings or, all that sort of stuff. Maybe that's too overtly racist for modern media. Now the angle is paranormal. Is that correct?
That's it. Yeah. It's just kind of molded into this new, less racist, more paranormal view.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that's a downer at all. I mean, you said at the beginning that we'd be letting folks down a little bit. I think it's important because, as we say often on the show, there are things out there that are unexplained. Mm-hmm. But we need to be very cautious when we really have to, I guess, draw the lines tightly around that unexplained thing if we're ever going to figure out what's going on there. And when we allow so much nonsense to bleed in that's poorly researched and is based on spurious evidence, then we lose the ability to understand. I mean, there are great mysteries here that we've talked about today. Mm-hmm. Why the mounds are so widespread and what they meant and what happened in those temples. These are fascinating questions that would be worth speculating over. But how can we even begin to if we're going to be telling lies?
Yeah. And it's just been repeated over and over again.
Yeah, so it's still alive and well. So the giant theory is now the go-to theory.
It is. It's I would say giants and then aliens. And it's sad. It wasn't until I got divorced and I got on 8 dating apps for the first time. Oh my God! So it's a good screener for me because
so when people hit you up, they'll say, "Do you know about giants?"
yes, or that'll be the first thing they say, and it's like, okay. I know not to talk to you.
That's great. That is handy. So maybe your profession is really working for you here.
Yeah, but it's shocking to me the number of people, and I've talked to some of my other coworkers about this, and they have similar things. We have people that come to one of our other museums that don't realize that the natives who built the mounds there were actually humans.
And not giants.
Not even humans. Not giants, but just not even human. Yeah. So it's dangerous conspiracy theory, and but fascinating. Fascinating.
Do you want to speculate on the politics of that? I mean, beyond what I had to say about paranormalism, and we love to play, and I think paranormalism becomes an excuse sometimes to tell stories that are just sensational, that they grab attention. It's far more interesting to say that there are giants than that there aren't. But why do you think there's politics in here with Native people still?
I've never asked any Native peoples what they feel about this.
About I guess the giant theory.
Yeah, I guess I always just feel
you feel embarrassed to bring it up.
It's like I don't even want to waste your time with this. But so yeah, I'm really not. I can't really speak to say how they feel about it, but I do know that they take archaeology very seriously, and that they want serious study done.
I guess I'm curious why you think people are if part of the reason people are still doing this giant theory is maybe out of a sense of guilt over, the losses of Native people, or, you know what I mean? Like, is this another way of dealing with America's history? Why keep telling the giant story?
Yeah. I mean, to me, it still is just a whitewashing
Yeah.
of what actually happened. And I think they just found a new way to say it, because they'll still, with these giants, a lot of them will go back to maybe Viking, or, oh, they had red hair. These giants had red hair and they were white.
Yeah.
So I don't think that maybe they mean to do it that way.
Yeah.
I don't think they realize where it comes from. I
Mm-hmm.
think that's the problem. That people don't realize where this all originated from, and that it was a blatant plan of attack, really, to dehumanize the natives and to justify white society taking over.
I mean, my personal take on these unintentional slights is that, honestly, if you're being honest, and if you're being careful, and you're looking for the evidence and you're following the evidence, you can generally avoid falling into these traps. It's when you're unwilling to look deeply and really
Mhm.
question, where is this coming from? What's this all about? That's when trouble starts.
It is, yes. Yeah. You need to question those 19th century newspaper accounts. Don't
Yes.
just take everything they say as
The same careful thought you would bring to trying to understand nuclear physics, I think, is the same careful thought you should bring to trying to understand that 19th century newspaper account. And if you're thinking carefully, you can avoid
yes.
these things. I agree. I think it's mostly unintentional.
I
I
do.
don't think these
Yeah,
folks are trying to do this, but they're doing it unintentionally because they're just not carefully following the evidence, right?
exactly.
So another pitch to carefully follow the evidence. Miranda, what can we do? If we want to advocate for Native people today, what can we do in regard to the burial mounds?
Well, you could, if anyone, there's a lot of like archaeological society groups, and also if you're in an area where there's tribal representatives, or they have a tribal historic preservation office, you could always see if they needed volunteers, or any kind of assistance with their studies.
What
Trying
about tourism? Is it a good thing to want to visit? Is it a bad thing?
You know what? There's actually some great native run museums. Unfortunately, in Cahokia, it's a state ran one, but up north, I haven't. There's a couple of really nice. I've just seen like virtual tours of them, but museums that are actually built by native peoples, and from their point of view. And I would say if you can find those places, go visit those, go talk to them, go see how they want to be presented, let them tell their story to you.
That is well worth the time and effort. That is great advice. I love when I go to a city or a town or any area to look beyond what's been, the flashy, touristy, I guess, TripAdvisor things, right?
Mhm.
I love to look for these, voices of the people of the area. And often, when I guess in regard to these burial mounds, these are native voices, right?
They are, yes, yeah. And, just be respectful when you visit them. There's a lot of sites, mound sites you can visit, at, like a lot of state historic sites that preserve mounds. And they might have programs with native speakers, and just take a look out there and see what you find. I imagine a lot of the listeners in the United States will be surprised to find as much archaeology so close to their home.
Yeah, we always think about the United States as being so young, which, it is as a political institution, but, wow, 1,500 years before the year one, we've got burial mounds, yeah? Fascinating.
It is.
Well, thank you so much, Miranda, for joining me. This has been an excellent conversation. I really appreciate you lending your expertise and telling our confessors all about these burial mounds. I couldn't have done it without you, for sure.
Well, thank you so much. It really was an honor to join you today. I love you guys, and you do such great work.
Thank you. Well, we'll try and keep it up, and keep us updated on your work and what you're up to there.
Okay, we'll do.
If you find out any updates on the burial mounds, I'm sure we'd love to hear more.
Awesome. Sounds good.
All right, thank you, Miranda, and thank you all for listening to Occult Confessions.